Alright, let's talk Godzilla Minus One spoilers. If you haven't already seen my previous video where I talk about my impressions on Godzilla Minus One, check it out before you watch this one. So again, this is a spoiler review / discussion. I am going to be talking about the movie in a lot of detail, so this is your final warning to click off the video. I totally understand because I am in full support of going into this movie blind if you can. Come back and watch it after you've seen the movie and tell me what you think. Tell me if I missed some things, because again, this movie is super fresh to me right now and a lot happened and I'm still processing it. I may forget a detail here or there or have the order of scenes a little wrong, but that's just because it's so fresh and, again, like I said, so new. So final warning, click off now. See Godzilla Minus One if you haven't yet. But if you have, the rest of the video is for you. Or if you don't care and you want to know everything about the movie, here we go. The movie starts out with our star, Kamiki Ryunosuke. He plays Koichi Shikishima, landing his plane on Odo Island. He is a kamikaze pilot in World War II. He lands on Odo Island to get repairs for his plane that was having issues, and he is confronted by some of the repairmen about his plane because it seems to be working just fine. And in that moment, you find that he is now being seen as dishonorable. In Japan, if you did not do your duty in the war, you were seen as dishonorable, and some people's duty was kamikaze airplanes, smashing themselves into ships, killing themselves for the country, for the war. That had to be extremely hard for some people, and I can only imagine not wanting to kill myself for my country and dying and never living my life. So you immediately can relate with Koichi's kind of lack of sacrifice because he doesn't want to die, but he then witnesses an attack from a very small Godzilla, something we've never seen before. I mean, it's kind of Godzillasaurus-like, but he moves like something we've never seen. He's very much like a violent monster, a T-Rex style. Like he's just running around and ripping people apart. He's grabbing people. Like, let's take this little Godzilla here. Not to say we're gonna kill him. He's grabbing people with their mouth and just chucking them. And you just see the bodies go. And he's not eating them. He's just chucking them. And you're just watching Godzilla just annihilate people. And it's not even Godzilla, it's this little thing that looks like a dinosaur. So I'm gonna say it's Godzillasaurus, but they called it Godzilla in the movie, so it's the Legend of Odo Island's Godzilla, which is very much a callback to the original movie. We see this little crew get just demolished by Godzilla, and Koichi is told to get to his gun in his plane and shoot Godzilla because the bullets are gonna be able to kill it. He gets over to the plane. He's very stressed out, and then in the moment he just can't do it, and he cracks. And Godzilla then destroys the plane, and he gets Koichi gets knocked out to wake up and find everybody dead except for one of the repairmen. His name is Tachibana. And Tachibana gives him hell for not taking the gun and shooting Godzilla, because if he had, maybe he would have killed Godzilla and all these men wouldn't be dead and they would have gone home. And he also didn't do his job as a kamikaze pilot, so he's super dishonorable. And just the weight of guilt, my God. Koichi, you feel bad for the guy. I don't think I could have pulled the trigger. I would have been scared shitless with Godzilla coming at me like that. And it was like a scary little monster Godzilla. Like, he was a little demon, but like as big as like maybe a T-Rex or something from a Jurassic Park film. He just was a menace, a little vicious menace, just mean, stomping on people and looking at them and just killing them. Something like we've never seen Godzilla do before. So anyways, moving on, Koichi goes home to find the whole city had been firebombed and flattened. Again, this is the final days of World War II, and he gets sent home after everything and just finds everything he knew was gone. His neighbor comes out and sees him and was like, "Oh, you're home, but weren't you a kamikaze pilot? Why didn't you do your job? If you had done your job, my family wouldn't maybe be dead. Your parents maybe wouldn't be dead." He's at his parents' house, which is just flattened and gone. So he's lost both of his parents. He's now being lectured on he should have killed himself for his country, because then maybe my family might still be alive and you deserve to die. Just like so heavy and sad. And then shortly after that, a woman thrusts herself onto him and she's carrying a baby, and all of a sudden they're all living together. I'm just shortening that up. A lot more happens in between that. Basically, what I saw was that Japan has kind of had to come together, and just even strangers had to come into each other's lives because everybody lost everything. This woman, Noriko, she's carrying a baby whose parents were killed and Noriko's family was killed. So Noriko feels responsible for this baby to give it a good life because everybody in her family was wiped out and that kid's family. And so when she runs into Koichi, they kind of become a family, but Koichi doesn't want to commit to a family because he's got so much war he's still fighting in his mind. He is traumatized by Godzilla. He has nightmares of Godzilla every night, it seems like. Over the years, we see them rebuilding their lives, getting back on their feet. We go forward a couple of years and see that the little girl has grown up. Koichi and Noriko are living together. They're kind of rebuilding their house and everything like that. Koichi then gets a job to help pull in mines and destroy them that were planted from the US ships. And he brings in a lot of money for the family. And in that process, we find that Godzilla had been kind of nuked a few times in the process of the years going by. There was a lot of the nuclear tests, and they happen to be where Godzilla was resting. And we don't see Godzilla himself just like getting nuked, but there's like a close-up of his eye and face just getting nuked, and then he kind of like starts to just like regenerate and grow in new weird ways in the moment. It's a very quick scene, but it's over a whole montage of kind of monster-versy looking like explosions of nukes, and like we're seeing plotting things happening and seeing things are happening with like some creature, all this kind of stuff. It's very Monarch Files kind of thing. So Koichi joins this crew with 3 other men. So we actually have the captain, the doc, and the kid, and they're all a great cast. It feels very Jaws, and they're out there learning how to pull in these mines, blow them up to clear up the waters so the ships don't get blown up and we can take in boats and have shipping and a life and an economy. The first scene with them on the boat all together, Kid kind of complains that he didn't get to go to war like everybody else did, and Koichi just gets up in his face and says, "You do not believe that. You do not want to have been in this war." And there is this sense of pride for their country that some people did feel the duty, and then the people that actually experienced it felt the terror and experienced the terror of what war brings and have a much different perspective. So there is just such a heavy, I keep using the word weight, but there's just weight in this movie that they just do such a wonderful job of delivering to the audience, and there's this tension all the way through. They're out there doing that, and in some of the mine exploding, they are sent to a boat after a while and see that Godzilla has taken out this boat and no one's left alive. Then Godzilla shows up and they use a couple mines on him, and it's quite the scene that you've seen the trailers. If you've seen the trailers, it's the scene with him chasing them on the boat, and they're shooting him, nothing's happening, and then they finally decide to use mines on him, and the first mine kind of puts him out, and he's like, "Oh shoot, okay," and then he gets up and comes at him even harder, and they drop a mine in his mouth, just like Jaws with the propane tank, and I thought they were gonna yell, "Smile, you son of a..." But they blow that mine up in Godzilla's mouth. His head blows off, like this chunk, like right in here, just blows off. And he's like laying there, dying, you think. And his face starts to grow back, and they're like, "Oh crap, we're gonna die." Godzilla starts to get ready to come back at them, and then he gets blasted with some artillery shells from a military vessel, and then Godzilla goes and wrecks that vessel with his atomic breath and crawling all over it, ripping it apart. He's getting blasted by the ship, and it's just all so crazy and dramatic and intense, and so much is happening, and you're just watching our main characters experience this devastation and watch that they're on this tiny little rinky boat, and this military vessel just got annihilated, and they can't do anything to stop Godzilla. So, I'm probably missing a few beats here or there, but I'm already overwhelmed by talking about this movie because it was just so intense. That scene was just like, you could feel the whole theater just like clenched to their seat, just like, oh my God, are we gonna make it off this boat? But they get back to the main shore. Godzilla has kind of like taken a rest after his atomic breath into the boat, and he used a lot of energy. After the whole boat scene happens, Koichi and everybody get back to the mainland. They were airlifted back because they got the crap kicked out of them. They go back to their lives. He's just like stressed about Godzilla. And a few days later, we see Noriko go get a job and go into Ginza to start her job. And she's on the train, and you've all seen the trailers, so you know the scene. She's in the train, and Godzilla shows up in Ginza and just wrecks the place. Like, comes through and there's nothing, he just annihilates it. She's on the train. He walks right up to it and he bites it. You saw it in the trailer, and he just picks it up. And she's hanging inside of the train still the entire time, and you're just watching her like dangling and hanging from Godzilla's mouth essentially. She falls down, she gets into the crowd, and you're watching her just get almost stampeded on. And then Koichi shows up, brings her aside, and then Godzilla's tail starts to light up, and all of his spines start to unlock a little bit, and they all slowly build off. Everything's glowing. You know what's coming. He unleashes his atomic breath. He builds up, and all the spines then shoot back into his back, and he launches forward like a big freaking blast of energy. The thing is about Godzilla in this movie, he's slow. I kind of talked about this in my previous review. He's slow moving, but then when he has to unleash or go nuts, he moves fast. And so he builds up and then launches that atomic breath. It flies through the whole city. It hits, and a blast like a nuke goes off, and everyone is taken out. You see Noriko push Koichi off to the side, and she then gets taken away by the blast. And you see I can't explain the feeling that the whole theater felt, but there was silence, and you can just feel the dread that happened. Koichi wakes up and sees Noriko gone, can't find her. He calls her name, and it's just heartbreaking to hear her call her name. And again, I'm talking about this in a Godzilla movie, and you're feeling this pain for this character who's already been through hell. He feels the guilt, and he's trying to get back to happiness, and then all of this happens, and you feel for him. And then the sky starts to rain black, like what would happen after a nuke went off, and the acid rain starts to come down, and the visual of the black rain on him while Godzilla is roaring up at the nuke was just so heavy. The movie was heavy, visually insane, awesome things happen, but it's just, there's a heavy weight to it. There was times where the movie was just uncomfortable because of how mean Godzilla was to people, and he's never gonna forgive them, as they say in the trailers. He's angry and he's mean and he's a monster. And this is, like I said in my initial thoughts, this is the first time I was scared of Godzilla, and there were times where I was just like terrified of the guy. And that's something I've wanted from a Godzilla movie for a long time, and we have it. Maybe some of you won't agree with me, but that's my opinion. We all have our own, and no one's wrong for any of theirs. Maybe some of you are. In the atomic breath scene, we see the reporters on the roof that felt very much like the reporters on the tower in Godzilla's attack in 1954. They're just like going up to the last possible minute, saying Godzilla's getting closer and closer, and then Godzilla just wrecks the building and they come falling down. There's just so much visceral action in this movie, and Godzilla just goes specifically after people. He takes out a boat at the beginning, and you're just like, oh, well, there goes. That's how our crew learns that they need a bigger boat, essentially. The Jaws moment. Koichi's knocked back down. Japan's brought back down. They've just been not necessarily firebombed again, but nuked, and you see the aftermath, and everything is gone. Everything's just devastated. It sucks. It's hard to see. It looks real. This whole movie, they did a great job of setting the tone of it being after World War II and just the despair the Japanese people had been going through. And also, the United States couldn't help out in this movie because they were afraid it would escalate the tensions with the Russians that were going on at the times, which makes total sense, and that's why they have no defense in this movie. They have a few rinky tanks that happen to shoot at Godzilla before he nukes the town, but that's all they get really for a little bit. And they come back, decide that Godzilla's probably going to come back in about 10 days, and a crew of people are going to fight Godzilla, essentially. Doc comes up with a plan to use bubbles to pull Godzilla down into the water. I'm not going to explain it well, but they use a certain kind of gas attached to tanks, and they unleash it, and by doing that, the tank will pull anything underwater because of the pressure change. And they want to bring Godzilla to a very low pressure and then pull him right back up, and all of the pressure changes should crush him internally and kill him. At least they hope. That was their attempt and their mission. And then it gets to be on the civilians' shoulders to take out Godzilla because there's no one else helping. The government's not helping. The United States isn't helping. They're on their own. And so when Doc formulates this plan and everybody gets involved, you're like, there's this like sense of hope, and it's exciting. You're watching them go after their plan, and in the idea, they're like, we're going to need a distraction. So Koichi has the idea to get a plane and use that as a distraction. You can tell he's got this idea that he's going to take his plane and put it in Godzilla's face, and he's going to finally do the kamikaze that he was meant to do, and that's the kamikaze that's going to save everybody. And you just feel that he's leading up to taking himself out, and you're not like, don't do it. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt all of us. You're gonna make us all cry. Don't do it. So Koichi has to get in touch with Tachibana, the repairman from the Oto Island that said he was a disgrace after the first Godzilla attack, and basically was sent him messages saying that you're the reason why Godzilla is here, and you're the reason why everybody died on that island. And it gets him so pissed off that he comes and finds Koichi and kicks his butt. And he's like, I knew you would come if I made you mad, so I need your help to fix this plane. And they fix the planes, and they use this, I can't remember the exact plane model, but it was like an experimental plane that was extremely fast and extremely agile and maneuverable. Koichi's going to fly that to distract Godzilla while these boats with the air tanks full of the gas wrap around Godzilla to then pull him underwater and then pull him back up. Unfortunately, Godzilla shows up just a little early, and their plan gets kind of scrambled, and they have to move much faster. Luckily, Koichi gets in there and distracts Godzilla for a little while. Godzilla does wreck some boats a little bit, but he's pulled back into the ocean before he gets too far into the mainland as he's heading right to Tokyo. The boat teams, they're wrapping Godzilla with the tanks, and they launch him off. They pull Godzilla down. He gets pissed. He comes back up, and he's about to use his atomic breath. He uses atomic breath once already on the boats and just annihilates the whole thing. They're screwed after that, they feel, but they keep trying. Then when they finally pull him down, he was charging his atomic breath, and he kind of like cracks under the water, and he's like, and kind of like dies a little bit, it looks like. But then he gets pulled back up, and they find that he's like shredded all the stuff, and they really have to fight with him to get him to come back up. After they've been wrecked by Godzilla, and there's I think only one boat left to tug Godzilla out of the water, they're screwed because that's not enough strength. We find that Kid shows up with a small army of tugboats, and they all kind of gang up on Godzilla as well, and they kind of lock him into place while things go down. And then when Godzilla's really trapped there, that's when he starts charging up his atomic breath, and we get stuck in this moment of, oh crap, how am I going to get out of this? And Godzilla's charging up and just looks like hell. He's been torn apart from all the water pressure changes. So their plan was working and just not going accordingly, because nothing ever does in one of these movies, it seems. Godzilla's unpredictable. They also use the perfect classic Toho Godzilla music at the perfect times. I believe there were moments from Mothra vs. Godzilla's theme. They use like suites is what they're called, so it's Godzilla's theme, then it mixes in with other Toho songs, and they use it during Godzilla's moments, and it's just awesome. And they also use, I believe it was the main theme from King Kong vs. Godzilla at the point while they're wrapping Godzilla up with the boats at the end there. And it just like got me hyped. When that song specifically came on, I just like started, I mentioned it in my previous video, I started banging my head and I was smiling, and Chelsea looked over at me and was like, what the hell is wrong with him? She just doesn't know how big of a deep cut it is for me, because I mean, I've watched that movie since the day I was born, I think. That song is just embedded into my brain, and it gets me going. So hearing it again when I did not expect it, it just fit the tone of what was happening in the movie at the right time. It's just great stuff. And eventually he comes back to the surface, and he's about to charge his atomic breath, and he's about to just hit the boat that has pretty much our entire main cast except for Koichi on it. And out of nowhere, Koichi's plane comes in, and it's been fitted with a bomb. Thanks to Tachibana, Koichi requested to put a bunch of bombs in the plane and a bunch of weaponry. A bunch of bombs to blow up right in Godzilla's face, and Koichi lands the plane essentially right in Godzilla's mouth. But in the split second before it hits Godzilla's mouth, we see that the plane ejects really quick. And planes didn't have ejection seats back then. They set that up earlier in the movie, that the planes were built so cheaply that there were no escape seats, so the pilots pretty much had to kamikaze to do their job or land the plane kind of thing. So we see Koichi launch himself out, and he's floating above Godzilla. Godzilla's face exploded. His whole head's gone. The atomic blast that he was about to unleash slowly starts to dissipate out of his body, and then he just starts to crumble and fall apart and sink into the ocean, and there's just beams of blue light bursting out of him, and he just crumbles and falls. And as he had been building up that atomic blast, the pressure from all the water changes. His skin was like gross, and like muscles had been bulging out. His eyeballs felt like they were bulging big and gross, and like not like Shin Godzilla silly or anything like that. He just looked gross and nasty, like a deep sea creature that had too much pressure too fast. And if you've ever seen like a dead animal from the ocean, the pressure changes from them. They turn gross and nasty, and they were doing that to Godzilla. So he dissipates and just he disintegrates and falls apart, and everybody celebrates, and they see Koichi falling from the sky, and everybody's happy. And then our neighbor, who I didn't mention him earlier, Somiko Ota, who's been babysitting the little girl for them while they're at work and such. She gets a telegram after having gotten a note from Akiko, the little girl, saying that Koichi was going to go do his duty and sacrifice himself finally after she had blamed him for not earlier. But you see that everybody builds a relationship together, and even though they called him a disgrace, everybody cares about Koichi, and they didn't want him to abandon this little girl, especially after Noriko died. And he didn't propose to Noriko, but he didn't want to propose to her because he was fighting this battle with Godzilla in his mind and all this heavy weight. And you find out that Noriko survived at the end and she's in the hospital. Oh, and I'm getting emotional already. That's a really big emotional punch that I just did not see coming. I saw the ejector seat coming because it cuts away at a certain point earlier in the movie where Tachibana is explaining how to use the plane, and right as he's about to show Koichi something, it cuts. To me, that felt very much like the autopilot scene in The Dark Knight Rises, where he's like, oh, the plane's autopilot hasn't worked, blah, 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 blah. And we all think Batman sacrifices himself at the end, and then we know how that all happens. But here, I kind of saw that coming, but I did not see Noriko surviving coming, because the way that the blast happened and she just got blasted away. And after everything Koichi had been through, to see the look on his face, it's hard. Having been through loss myself, I can only imagine the feelings I would have if I got to see the people I'd lost again. The emotional, you can hear it in my voice. The emotional impact that something like that has is strong. And for it to come from a Godzilla movie, my favorite franchise in the world, it's just like really something special. So I'm very grateful that this movie exists. And after everything, final shot of the movie, we pan back down to the water and see a chunk of flesh just floating there, and it starts to regenerate, just kind of like the beating heart in GMK. And I don't know if that is set up for a sequel or if it's just doing the GMK thing that shows that Godzilla is eternal and he can never die. He's always going to be around, and love it. I mean, honestly, I don't know if I need a sequel, direct sequel, kind of like Shin Godzilla. I know a lot of people want a sequel to that, but the ending as it is left such a bigger, like, creepiness that I can use my imagination, and possibly the movie that would be a sequel would never hit my imagination, you know? And that's kind of what I was saying previously in my other video about expectations, and people might have their set way too high with this movie. And not to say that they can't and they shouldn't, but there are times where sometimes your imagination can make something, even for you, better than what an actual movie can be delivered. But I don't need sequels here. I mean, if they made them, I'd be there front row for opening night, like, because I'm all in on Godzilla. I always have been. But I'm also happy when they do these solo outings and leave it with a one-note, strong ending. And that's to me, that's great. This movie hit me really hard, and I mean, I've been gushing about it here for a while. There's just so much good going on in this movie. It's probably not perfect. I need to see it again. My emotions are really high, clearly, after you guys listen to me blabber about loss here just for a little bit. But it is a solid Godzilla movie. If you don't like it, we have the MonsterVerse. We have other things happening in this franchise. There is so much different Godzilla happening at all times right now that it's like we have a little bit of something for everybody. And this Godzilla movie was for me and probably a lot of other fans, but also people who are not Godzilla fans. Like, this is just a solid movie that so many people will be able to take in and go, oh my God, this is what Godzilla is supposed to be like. Okay, I'm on board. All right, thank you so much for watching Mike's Monsters. Subscribe, follow me for toy photography and more toy reviews, maybe more Godzilla Minus One videos. I've got a lot more stuff coming out in the future. Follow me on social media, follow me on TikTok, Instagram. Thank you again to Toho for the invite. This was just such a crazy, exciting, fun time. Tell me what you think of Godzilla Minus One when you've finally seen it. Tell me if I'm wrong in my opinions here, or if I somehow just saw the wrong movie. Maybe I got the plot wrong. But yeah, just let me know what you think. Are you excited for Godzilla Minus One? If you've watched this before the movie came out, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching Mike's Monsters, and have a great rest of your day.